Paper Mario 64 and The Thousand Year Door are two of my favorite games of all time. They weren't my first RPGs, that distinction belongs to Pokemon, but they were the reasons I fell in love with the genre. Rather than being a quick romp through many locations in the Mario universe, it gave you a chance to explore the worlds more in depth. Paper Mario 64 took the usual grass, desert, jungle, ice, and lava worlds that Mario games always do and remixes them to create a new setting. The grass world has a peaceful village of Koopas that evolves as you travel to the outskirts that houses a fortress full of bombs and cannons ready to go to war. The desert setting is a massive world that has mountains, an expansive maze-like desert, and an ancient tomb housing a pharaoh. As the game goes on, it starts combining the usual level themes in interesting ways, such as putting a volcano in the middle of the jungle to switch gears to a lava setting in a natural way, or leading the player to a spooky forest, disarming them with boos to make the player think that the spooky mansion will be the main setting, only to immediately move on and bring us to a setting we've never seen boos in. A small village themed after westerns and a massive castle with giant furniture, which becomes part stealth game to avoid being thrown back to the start. The Thousand Year Door took us away from the Mushroom Kingdom entirely and gave us brand new locales that we've never seen in Mario before. There is a noose in the center of a town in a Mario game, and I feel like people don't talk about it enough. There's also a gladiator arena based off of professional wrestling where you need to fight your way to the top, a mystery on a train parodying Murder on the Orient Express, aliens on the moon. When you see praise for these games' originality, it extends to the gameplay itself. It takes a very Mario-esque approach to your usual RPG overworld and turn-based combat. In the overworld, you control Mario in a 3D space, solving puzzles to move forward in dungeons, usually with the help of his partners. A group of friendly Mario enemies, each with their own distinct abilities Mario can take advantage of. Each one also has a distinct personality with unique dialogue for major story moments depending on who is currently out with Mario, sometimes having full arcs dedicated to the partners you obtain. This extends to combat as well, being a more streamlined version of the battle system of Super Mario RPG. Everything you do in battle has an action command that allows you to do more damage by timing your attacks in a micro-rhythm game, with Thousand Year Door adding even more hidden commands to let you recharge your special meter faster. These systems, these worlds, these characters, they all struck a chord with audiences and made these games instant classics. They are still seen as some of Mario's finest outings, with developers today paying homage to this series that has inspired them so much. With the direction the series was going, it definitely seems like Paper Mario was set to be Nintendo's flagship console RPG series. Intelligent systems were also allowed to experiment, making Super Paper Mario with a focus squarely on the story, world, and characters, and experimenting with the gameplay as an action RPG set within the usual Mario formula. While it is drastically different than its predecessors, everything that made Paper Mario special was still front and center. The change in gameplay was meant to be reflective of the new world we spent the game exploring. The areas we're exploring are in between dimensions, and all the characters have a more polygonal design, like loose pieces of paper being assembled to create characters. Despite the shift in gameplay, the story still felt like something in line with past entries, retaining the comedic tone and darker atmosphere in the story and presentation. But as I'm sure most people watching this video already know, this was the last Paper Mario-esque experience we got in more than a decade. The fourth game in the series, Paper Mario Sticker Star, looks like a return to the original gameplay formula, but the resemblance is only surface level. Gone is the expansive world full of original characters, gone was the experimental nature of the battle system, gone was everything that made Paper Mario, Paper Mario. What was left was nothing more than a shell of what the series represented. The explorable world was replaced with a level select, with the pacing more akin to your regular Mario game. But rather than testing your platforming skills, it tested your puzzle-solving skills. The turn-based battle system turned into a chore since every battle was a net loss for your progress. And the complex story full of diverse characters and well-written dialogue became Toad spouting jokes while Mario fights Bowser. When Color Splash was released 4 years later, it was almost the exact same experience with some quality of life additions to the game that failed to address the core issues, mainly that of invalidating the whole idea of actually engaging with the gameplay systems. You use your limited resources in battle to get coins to then spend those coins to regain your resources from the battle you just did. So it's easier to just avoid battle since the cost was always higher than the reward. Color Splash tried to remedy this by giving you experience in battles that let you hold more paint at once. But running out of paint is never an issue in the game since almost everything in the environment just gives you paint. The main addition that Color Splash added was the harder leaning on the paper aesthetic. Rather than the pop-up book world the games were known for, the game pivoted to an art style built entirely around arts and crafts, and it felt like the nail in the coffin for this once great series. The originality of the Paper Mario brand was gone for just another Mario game with a heavy leaning on the paper aesthetic. The paper look was never that important to the series before these games, rather just being an excuse for a different art style. There were some power-ups based around the paper, sure, but it was more an excuse to give players more options for traversal in the form of a joke, rather than having it affect the world building of the games. The world and story was more important than everything being paper. All of the charm and magic of exploring these worlds were gone. Intelligent System just couldn't nail a Paper Mario anymore. That is, until the release of Paper Mario and the Origami King. This was a game that seemed like it wanted to bridge the gap between what fans of the original Paper Mario wanted while still being able to have its own identity. Origami King returns to the connected world of the earlier games. While backtracking is severely reduced, you still see how the different areas connect to each other, rather than just moving toward it on the world map. Another way they make the world feel connected is through the game's story. You hear about all of these different characters in the background. You see remnants of these ancient toads like King Shroomsies and Captain Toad. You see stuff like the Super Marino in the museum, and as the game continues on, you see how it all connects together. You are rewarded for not just skipping through text boxes and actually absorbing what the story is saying. While the story isn't nearly as heavy or engaging as past entries, having a story with any depth at all was a welcome surprise. I honestly loved slowly uncovering the mysteries of the Mushroom Kingdom's past, and if you don't care to find out the extra lore of the world you're exploring, you can just ignore it. A lot of the flavor text is optional, and the story presented in the game is leagues above the past two entries. The game started with an effective hook, showing through text boxes and foreboding dialogue with Princess Peach that this isn't going to be the same dumb, wacky adventure the previous two games were. The whole opening feels like something out of a survival horror game before it draws you into the usual colorful adventure of Paper Mario. The opening creates this fun dichotomy between the horrible folded soldiers and the flat paper characters. Olivia brought a fun and tragic set of eyes to the events of the game, something that hasn't really been seen since Super Paper Mario. As fun as it is to have each of our partners in the original two games chime in every now and then with a line that shows off their personality, having a single party member follow you allows for the developers to create an arc for that character that is omnipresent within the story itself rather than through a single chapter. Tippy in Super Paper Mario is a great example of this. It's honestly why I don't necessarily like the criticisms that Paper Mario's pixels don't have that much of a personality. It was made clear that Tippy is the center point of the story, and she has one of the best arcs in the series, leading to a phantom pain when you start the post-game and she's taken away from you. Suck on that, Kojima. Olivia reminds me a lot of the philosophies that went into making Tippy such a memorable character. She actively wants to undo the evil that her brother has plagued the Mushroom Kingdom with. She gets overwhelmed with the support of characters helping her in what she views as her quest. She mourns the death of a friend that sacrificed themselves for her. I can't think of a single moment in the entirety of Sticker Star or Color Splash that let me connect to Kirsty or Huey on the same level I did when I comforted Olivia in the cave. I will die for her! Olivia reminds me a lot of the same philosophies that went into making Tippy such a memorable character. Despite his name being in the title, Mario isn't really a character in Sticker Star or Color Splash, more so being an avatar for the player. So Kirsty and Huey were effectively talking to a brick wall and acted more as annoying tutorial characters rather than a member of your party. So when these characters sacrifice themselves to save the day, you don't feel any emotional weight. Origami King's reintroduction of partner characters allow for the writers to effectively change the dynamic of the group whenever they feel like the stuff between Mario and Olivia got stale. Even though their use in-game was very limited, they fundamentally changed the dynamic from chapter to chapter. It gave the writers ways to expand on our characters and make it feel like an actual adventure rather than a checklist of levels to get through. And even though every single game since Super Paper Mario ends with a partner character sacrificing themselves to save the world, Sticker Star and Color Splash just didn't have any of the weight behind it. But losing Olivia? The free spirit that finds joy and happiness in absolutely everything? The one character that even Bowser Jr. would show respect for? Brought a fucking tear to my eye, man. Even though the game is still as lighthearted as the other games, you still feel satisfied in the character's journey thanks to the excellent writing and additions to the cast. And this willingness to experiment is also reflected in the gameplay. Rather than a traditional turn-based battle system, the game opts to do these puzzle battles. Enemies are placed in rings around you, and it's up to you to line them up in a limited number of moves to give yourself the best tactical advantage. And during bosses, the roles are reversed. The boss is in the center of the stage, and you need to manipulate the rings in order to solve the puzzle that is their weakness. Yeah, it's not your traditional turn-based combat, but it's still a rewarding battle system. The challenges of the puzzles become harder to figure out as the game goes on, while the bosses continue to get tougher, making their weaknesses less obvious to the player, rewarding experimentation in trying to figure out the correct answer to the puzzle before you're taken down. And the thing that bothers me the most is that I still see a lot of people disregarding this game because of the lack of a traditional RPG system. Rather than rewarding the player with experience points after battle, you get coins. In fact, pretty much everything you do in the game grants you with coins. Coins can be used to purchase items and weapons, which help if you fail a puzzle lineup but still want to thin the ranks of your enemies. They can also be used in battle to buy yourself more time to solve the puzzles, or to get support from toads you rescued in the overworld to help make the puzzles easier. You can also buy permanent upgrades to Mario to make him more capable in battle. It retains just enough to be identifiable as a Paper Mario game while still being wholly unique in the way Miyamoto wanted it to be. Paper Mario and the Origami King may not be the RPG masterpiece I was hoping for, but what I realized while I was playing it was that I didn't want it to be. Because despite the reused art assets, the battle systems, even the titles of the games themselves, these two are not the same series. Paper Mario is a comedic RPG with a complex story full of twists and turns. It wants to challenge the player's perceptions of right and wrong, it wants to transport you into unique worlds that are different enough from what you know from the main series, but something still distinctly Mario. Paper Mario is a lighthearted adventure game series focusing on exploration in the overworld and puzzles, aiming to take the adventure game genre and put a Mario spin on it. And notice how I didn't call the games RPGs, because no matter how you slice it, they aren't RPGs. Once you start looking at these games as a fully separate series, a series that isn't even trying to emulate the same genre as the other, you can start getting an appreciation for the few things Sticker Star and Color Splash did right. And you can see how they laid the foundation to be improved upon in Origami King. The biggest thing holding these games back was this need to still include the mechanics that were so important to the Paper Mario brand, namely the turn-based battles in a game that was prohibited from using the mechanics of its predecessors. It is a well-known secret that Miyamoto is the one that pushed the team to go into a new direction, and reading interviews from today and even back then, you can tell there was this uneasy feeling to the change in direction that they were forced to go in. Now, if you think this video is gonna be me defending Color Splash and Sticker Star, you're wrong. Those games are just bad. The only thing I will argue is that they planted the seeds for what would become Origami King. And the main thing that holds them back is this focus on parts of the game that try to push it closer to its predecessors rather than allowing the new mechanics to just shine through. You can see the things that gave Origami King an engaging battle system and its gameplay philosophies present in those games, albeit implemented in a much worse way. The puzzle battle philosophies that made the Origami King so much fun can be seen in Sticker Star if you look at it from a certain point of view. People complained that the battles wasted your resources and were not worth the cost of investment, and yeah, that's the truth. But the thing that no one wants to admit is that the battle system was meant to have this approach. Rather than looking at the enemies in battle the way you would for a normal turn-based RPG, you have to look at it like a puzzle. Your goal is to assess the situation and try to eliminate all of the enemies while using as little resources as possible. Yeah, it is not an engaging system in any way, but the idea is there. Especially with the things you can find through exploration of the overworld. The things are the more evident side of the puzzle aspect of battles, making you think through the appropriate time to use them against bosses to take advantage of their weaknesses. Where the game completely messes up, though, is the fact that it doesn't give you enough information to know what tools to bring to battle. While in hindsight, the things that affect the bosses make sense, the player doesn't have any of this information on their first run through, and if you don't have the thing already in your inventory, there's no way to know what to do. And since everything was single use, experimentation was frowned upon. So you never really knew what the objects would do in battle unless you've tested them before, meaning you had to spend even more coins to repurchase them. And that's the aspect of the system that frustrated players the most. How was I supposed to know that Morton would light his hammer on fire? How could I have known I could absorb the poison of Gooper Blooper with a sponge if I have never had the chance to experiment with the sponge? In a game about solving puzzles when a majority of them barely require thought for their solutions, and the ones that actually require thought can't be properly prepared for, No wonder people hated them. Since the puzzle aspect was so obtuse and visually similar to past entries, people completely disregarded what the game was trying to do. Battles in 64 and Thousand Year Door let you build Mario using the badges in your inventory. As long as you found them through exploration, you had access to them at any time as long as you had enough badge points, which would be upgraded at your discretion. And your build could go up against any boss in the game, and if you were having trouble, you could always switch your badges around to switch up Mario's playstyle in battle, or try a different approach using a certain ability of one of your partners. You always had an answer and a way out, whereas the puzzle-like system of the newer games required you to have a full knowledge of stuff that the game just didn't telegraph to you. Origami King fixes that issue by tailoring boss encounters to your abilities of where you currently are in the story. No matter the enemy or the boss, you have every tool you need to solve the issue. Regular battles and boss battles are just different problems to be solved by using the same mechanics. Regular battles require you to study the battlefield to try to end the fight before the enemy can even touch you. All you need to do is line them up to either be in range of your hammer or in a row so that you can use a jump to go down the line. By lining everyone up, you get an extra attack boost for the turn. But if you fail the puzzle, chances are you will need to defend yourself from the oncoming attacks. Just like in Color Splash and Sticker Star, you're rewarded for being able to clear the screen as quickly as possible. The only difference being that in Origami King, you always result in a net positive, not through experience, but through coins. So the only time the battles are done at a net loss for the player is if you're really stuck and wanted to solve the puzzle yourself and keep trying to buy time until you do it. Which I often did because the answer was always right at the tip of my tongue, I just needed like an extra 20 seconds to figure it out. And when it comes to bosses, you never have to worry about being prepared for what's to come. The answer to the problem is already on the board, it is up to you to figure it out. Even your weapons, which are this game's versions of the sticker and card system from previous entries, doesn't do much for the bosses since the main way to damage them is to read their attacks during the fight and respond with either your thousandfold arms or a elemental attack. The weapons feel more like ways to end regular battles faster that you couldn't solve the puzzles for, still being able to do more damage and control the battlefield. If I could change one thing about the battle system of Origami King, it would be the use of items. The only combat items that you have are Fire and Ice Flowers, the Tanuki Tail, and a POW block. The POW block is a nice catch-all item since it hits the entire battlefield at once, so you can still do a significant amount of damage even when you fail the puzzle, but the flowers and tail don't do anything different than your jump or your hammer. And since that's the case, what's the point of using them over your regular abilities? I think that the items should have been ways to deal with puzzle failures. Increase the number of items, but have them each have a different pattern to the attack. That way, the reward for solving puzzles is the power boost and being able to use your regular attacks, which cost less than a single-use item. You would still have rewards inherently built into your battle system, while still requiring strategy from people that failed the initial puzzle. One-turn battles should be the reward, not what's expected. But surprisingly, these weren't even the only types of battles in the game. The paper macho enemies are full-on battles that take place solely on the overworld, something even the RPG titles didn't give you. These still have a puzzle aspect, requiring you to figure out the pattern for that particular enemy and smack the King Ollie symbol on its body. It is the quickest and most actiony of the fights in the game and helps make the overworld feel like more than just an avenue for jokes in the next encounter. You could very much be in danger at any time while exploring the dungeons, and it's up to you to use the environment around you to beat the monster. The one thing that both Paper Mario series have in common is the control of Mario in the overworld. You can move, jump, or slam your hammer, and that consistency is probably another thing that we can add to the pile that made it harder for Sticker Star and Color Splash to stand on their own. But exploration was always limited by what your next objective was. Dungeon exploration was never more than following a mostly linear path with rooms acting as individual puzzles before you advance, and anything outside of dungeons was usually no more complicated than talking to a specific NPC. Color Splash and Sticker Star's level-based structure led to a similar feeling, with each level being an individual challenge to overcome before progressing, sometimes requiring you to have a specific thing in order to reach the goal, which, like battles, don't make it obvious what you should bring into the level, not giving the player knowledge of their objective until they are face to face with it and are forced to be booted if they don't happen to have the correct solution on them. What Origami King does is keep the overworld interesting by making exploration integral to every world, and changing what exploration means to the player in every chapter. Shogun Studios is a chapter based on doing a Zelda-esque fetch quest in order to progress. Sandpaper Desert makes you explore a vast desert in order to gain entrance to a dungeon. Part of the game even has you explore the Great Sea on a boat, marking islands on your map as you discover them, a tower that requires 3 orbs to open, resulting in you doing the trials of courage, power, and wisdom to obtain them. Kind of obvious if you think about it. Like I said earlier in the video, I consider these two different series. But until Origami King, it never clicked on how they could have done it. The paper aspect of the series may not be the most important thing to the narrative of the game, but it was central to the whole aesthetic and atmosphere that permeated through every aspect of the franchise. It helped inform the way that they were written, it helped give the games memorable upgrades that were wholly original, it helped give characters memorable designs outside of, well, giving them actual designs. So when Miyamoto told Intelligent Software to make a game different than the Thousand Year Door, what if they responded by taking the paper aesthetic and putting it over Zelda instead? Rather than trying to retool the established Paper Mario mechanics into a brand new system, what if they could just go wild with it with the items and weapons of Zelda? Rather than collecting jumps and hammers, imagine these being the Zelda arsenal, forcing you to think through which item would be best to get through the current battle. Yeah, even if it ended up sucking, at least it would be something brand new. Say what you will about the quality of the gameplay, the execution of the paper aesthetic was getting better and better. Without a fun story to fuel the writing, they made the game as funny as they could. They went all in making the story revolve around paper and played with the solutions to the problems in the game. These games were meant to be quirky adventure games with stupid quirky adventure game problems. It just feels the obligation to give people a battle system that at least somewhat resembles the original titles. And if they just made it Zelda, it would be a great excuse to jump genres. The best part of the Origami King was exploring the world with the characters, letting their personalities shine through, just letting them talk to each other. I felt like the battles had their time and place, but if I entered an area and saw a lot of folded soldiers, I would still react the same way I did in Color Splash or Sticker Star and avoid them. But if you are significantly stronger than the soldier, a single attack will take them down, and that's when the Zelda idea first occurred to me. Have a basic Zelda define basic exploration in the overworld so you can put a heavier emphasis on the adventure game aspect. Battles are more fun and rewarding here, but they're still annoying pace breakers when you're really into the story itself. Your reaction is still to avoid battles because you don't know if it'll be 30 seconds or 3 minutes. Being a Zelda game and just letting your sword slash enemies in half would alleviate the annoyances of having a full room of newer enemies that you can't one-shot. Leave the battle system for required fights, letting the developers create personalized puzzles for specific story moments. Olivia's role in the story also mirrors Zelda companions much more than the partner systems of old. The most your partners did was chime in during story events, but Olivia's journey was central to the game. She gives Mario a bunch of new abilities for progression, but has a lot more in common with a Navi than a Goombario. There are hundreds of ways you could translate the later games into Zelda, and I think if you saw it like that, you would understand where I come from when I say that Paper Mario and Paper Mario are two entirely different series. More Paper Mario doesn't take away the magic of those original games, but they do muddy the waters a bit. Most series don't see a massive shift in genre and playstyle the way Paper Mario did. We know how great Paper Mario is, but new potential fans will just be bombarded with how bad Paper Mario is now. These games rightfully deserve criticism, and Nintendo continuing to experiment with the Paper Mario brand without giving the series a consistent style or tone will just make it harder for people to get invested. But a brand new franchise acting as a spiritual successor to what those games did kills two birds with one stone. You get to preserve the legacy of a great series while also letting the team experiment in new ways. Experimentation should be rewarded, and I think the negative reception of Sticker Star and Color Splash would have been lessened if Paper Mario were allowed to stick to its roots and have those regulated to spin-offs. But the Paper Mario series as it stands are 2 turn-based RPGs, 1 action RPG platformer, 2 turn-based adventure games, and a puzzle adventure game. Paper Mario at this point doesn't have any consistency other than Mario and Paper World. Even grouping them together in the way I did shows how different each entry is. Even if it did stumble for a while, I'm really glad that Paper Mario has found its footing again with the Origami King. While I personally prefer the direction of the older titles, this new series is heading in a really great direction I would love to see continue. And now that Intelligent System has this new base, I would love to see them innovate and explore this new direction. But that also has me wondering, where do you think Paper Mario is and how it currently stands? Where do you want to see the direction of the franchise go? Please leave a comment down below or join my Discord to get a conversation going. And while I have you here, why not click this playlist over here to see reviews of other games I've done? And why not subscribe so you know whenever I post a new video? Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time. Now that I have a green screen, I should do something fun like WAH!